Hi, Laura. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I'll ask you the first question. What's the hardest change you've been through in your life?
Thought so long and hard about this, Gareth. There's so many things that we could talk about, and I had to listen to some of your other episodes, and I was thinking, everybody wants to talk about the professional and the personal, don't they? So my whole life is kind of merged together with those things, and my first initial thought was the biggest change was probably post COVID for us, but then I thought, I really don't want to focus on that, and we'll probably touch on bits of that later on anyway. So if I'm be honest, I think it's probably when I got married. In Anybody who knows me will know that I am a fiercely independent person, and letting the walls down to somebody else, even letting them in, was really difficult for me. So I think in the best possible way, and obviously it's turned out really well. We're now business partners as well as husband and wife, which is nice. But I think that initial um, change from just relying on myself to having myself and somebody else there is quite a big change for me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's funny because I was doing research and writing questions, and
Mhm.
um, I always try and put it in a bit of an order, so the story flows. And one of the questions I was going to ask you was about Mike, and
Wasn't it?
yeah, because looking at social media, and you always talk about working together, and what
Mhm.
is that like working together?
It's the best. Honestly, it's really good. He's going to listen to this, so I don't want to big him up too much. It's incredible. Why would you not want to spend all of your time with the person that you've chose to spend your life with? I know that there's a lot of couples out there that say, oh no, I couldn't spend that much time with them, or they don't want to add the professional element onto the marriage. But for me, all parts of my life, I know there's work-life balance, but work is life. Work, not in a depressing way. My life isn't my work, but my work certainly forms part of my life. So um, Mike actually used to be a personal trainer, um, wasn't passionate about it, and went back to university to get his psychology degree. And then during the process of him being at university, he realized that it was the research and the data side of psychology that he was very good at, the analytical side of things. And so rather than going into, maybe the NHS route, he started supporting the business part time whilst he was still at university. Um, and it just made logical sense that afterwards that would be the case, and then we don't have this challenge of when have you got annual leave. I mean, we run a business, so we don't have any annual leave, let's be honest, but just kind of aligning our lives, I suppose, because you spend so much time at work. I don't want to spend all of that time apart. I want to spend it together. So it's not like we're sat next to each other, working away. He's on his desk, I'm on mine, we're working on different things. He works more on ops, I work on the creative business development, that side of things. But honestly, it is really great. I mean, you'd have to ask the rest of the staff if they think it's as great as I do. So I know we have a bit of banter, but yeah, highly recommend it.
You say obviously that's really a positive thing, but running a business is really hard, right?
Mhm.
And particularly for as long as you have. Um, and are there any tough moments at work between you, or is it always plain
Um,
sailing?
No, it's definitely not always plain sailing. You run a business, and you know absolutely that I would be lying if I said that it was. Um, there's pros and cons to it. The pros far outweigh the cons. Um, from the perspective of us both working in the business, the I would say main challenge is finances and a fear of not having enough money to pay the bills, essentially. So the business might be thriving, but behind the scenes, any business owner knows, you're paying VAT, corporation tax, your staff, pensions, all of your normal bills, everything it takes to run a business. And then, oh yeah, let's not forget we should probably pay ourselves as well, and pay our own personal bills. And we can't rely on one of us having an external salary coming in. So I'd say there is always that pressure. It's never been something that we've been put in a difficult position with, thankfully. We're both quite strategic in our planning and the types of things that we take on. But I'd say that's probably the biggest thing. And kind of attached to that is not letting it take over our life. So I used to manage the accountant and the finances before Mike joined the business full time. Hated it. Numbers is not something that I'm great with or passionate about. So as soon as I could have handed that over, Mike's excellent with all of that kind of thing, but he needs to talk about it and vent. And when, not all clients pay on time, not all projects work on the same timeline. And when things don't go exactly to your plan, you kind of have to pivot and adjust, your own financial planning. And he'll want to talk about it, and it really stresses me out. And for a while, I'd say, can you schedule something in my diary so we can talk about it? Because just bringing it up out of the blue, I don't want to have that conversation. Or if we're sat having breakfast on the weekend, I don't want to talk about it. But because it's something we both have in common, and it's a big part of our life, it's really easy to do that. So I think putting boundaries in place to not do that is something that we've had to work on.
I think that's great advice, and I think my wife and I started our business, although she works full time currently. Because we haven't made that leap yet, in terms of both of us being in the business. Because yeah, we feel exactly the same. Having that a guaranteed salary every month is somewhat of a comfort blanket, but and disagreement's quite good, right? If you're just agreeing about everything, then you're not necessarily making the right decisions, are you?
Yeah, I absolutely couldn't stand that. I don't bring anybody into the business that's a yes person. I certainly didn't marry a yes person. He definitely didn't marry a yes person, I can tell you that. So I just don't think there's anything wrong with having a different opinion to other people. Doesn't mean that you can't be friends or family or co-workers. It's just variety, and that's what makes the world go round, really. If everybody was the same, everything would be dull, certain things wouldn't get done. It just doesn't work like that. So yeah, it works for us because we're both quite different. Yeah, and that's what the business needs, I think. Certainly doesn't need two of me.
um, so when I was researching the episode, I read something that you said, which was do what you love and love what you do. So
Mhm.
why do you love? I was going to say marketing, but I'm not sure marketing sums up everything that you do, which we'll
It's
probably get
varied,
into.
isn't it?
We'll get into later. But why do you love it? Where does that come from?
People talk about entrepreneurial spirit, and if you want to work for yourself, it's in you. And I'm not sure that I believe that for everybody, but it is the case for me. I've always wanted to work for myself and make a difference, and I feel like that's what I'm on the way to doing here, and I'm really passionate about it. I wouldn't say I'm necessarily sorry, I wouldn't say I necessarily grew up thinking property and place is my passion. um, but it's evolved to such that it is. So I'm passionate about having the flexibility and showing other people that you can have flexibility in your life and your work, and that they can be the same thing. I'm passionate about working for a company. Yes, it's mine, but having other people work for it as well, where you can be yourself, and you don't have to feel like you're fitting your personality into a corporate circle, that it just doesn't work. So that side of things is something that really kind of keeps me happy and loving what I'm doing. In terms of the actual industry that I got into, that's a bit of a longer story, to be honest with you. So I don't know if you want the whole thing.
Of course.
Um, okay. So right, so shall I just give you the backstory of Laura and how I got here? Gosh, highlights. I calculated how many houses I've lived in. So I'm 39, and this figure hasn't changed for the last 4 years. So I've lived in 34 houses, which I think
Wow.
is a big old number. So we're going back to obviously birth, and I have included in there university as well. But my family hasn't lived in a town and stayed in the town. I was brought up in the East Midlands, and at the age of 16, my dad got a job in the prison service, and we all moved to Essex. Amazing place to live. Absolute best 2 years of my life. I loved it. I didn't want to go to university. I wanted to work for myself, or get a job, just bring money in. I wanted that to be kind of the way my life went. So I got a job in the bank, and I worked for Lloyd's TSB, not in the branch dealing with actual real people. Thankfully, I was in an office. Wasn't ready for that yet. And I was there for 2 years and I absolutely loved it. And then all my friends started going to university. So that was between me being 16 and 18. And when I got to 18, all my friends started going to university. And I went, oh, I really want to go to university if they're going. So I blagged my way into university with no A levels, just my GCSEs. And I had a fabulous time. And whilst I was there, my dad's position in the prison service moved, and they moved up to Durham. So when I left university, I moved out back into my parents' house, and that was then in Durham. And then, as you do, after a couple of months of living back with your parents, you think, oh God, I can't do this. And I moved out, and I told my a couple of my friends, I'm going to move somewhere. I don't really care where it is. I just want to move to a city. So me and a couple of friends decided to move to Manchester. So we did that. And just in the course of, BTR wasn't a thing back then. So, we had a flat, and then one of the rooms wasn't as big as the others. So after 6 months, we had to move to another flat, and then somebody else could have the big room with the ensuite and all that. And then when I met Mike, he wasn't from Manchester, he was from Stoke. So we compromised and we moved to Congleton, which is kind of on the Staffordshire-Cheshire border. So I moved again. But the thing that I really realised is moving around so much makes you really feel like you don't really belong anywhere. And as you become an adult, you leave university, and you start working and having jobs, you start to realize how difficult it is to kind of build a life in a place and make new friends. When you haven't got your family there, your childhood family, and childhood friends and all of that. And I started to realize that it's so difficult being in a new place. How on earth do you know what's going on? Who's doing what? How do you make friends? And so I became really passionate about making that simpler. And I had local, my second business in my brain. It wasn't called that. It didn't have a name. I didn't know how I was going to monetize it. And then I came across a website called Didsbury Life. So Didsbury is an area of Manchester, and there was a company called the Life Group or something like that, and they were a design company, and they basically capitalized on their local town by creating this website that promoted local businesses and goings on, and then they brought those businesses in presumably as customers and did some design work and marketing and social media for them. But the setup of the site was perfect. It was exactly what I was looking at, and I was like, damn it, somebody beat me to it. And then carried on with my life, had all of my my jobs and my career and whatever, and I could never shake it. And then a couple of years ago, everything was the same. There was no impact. The high streets were dying, and I just thought, oh my goodness, we're going to lose all of this. I'm passionate about being authentic. My business is called Real, based on, everybody thinks it's called Real for some reason, but it is real. And it's because I've always been told that I'm the same regardless of who I speak to, in terms, whether it's a CEO, an investor, a child, I'm generally just me. Obviously, I can be appropriate. But but I just thought we're going to lose it, and so I needed to do something to basically bring to life the thing that I'd had in my mind 15 years ago. So I started to build Real in the place industry, and then local came to life as well. So that's quite long-winded, but basically that's why I'm passionate about place, because I really feel that it's important, use it or lose it, and currently we're losing it. So we need to make it more accessible in the real world. So that's why I'm really passionate about that.
That's funny you say like moving around, and people ask me where I'm from, and
Mhm.
like my family didn't move around, when we were younger. Well, I mean, we moved when we were 16, but I then went to university and then ended up in hospitality and went wherever the next job was all around the country. And people ask me where I'm from, and I never know what to say
Mhm.
because I actually don't know. I couldn't tell you where I'm from because I've lived in so many different places.
Yeah.
And you're
That's-
right. You don't get to know a place like unless you force yourself, particularly now if you're working from home or whatever. When we moved here, I was talking to somebody the other day that works on a local council, and when we moved here during, dare I say it, COVID. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, we moved here during COVID, and the first year was pretty much lockdown. So I was like, oh, I didn't actually learn anything about where I lived.
Mhm.
So, so yeah, and we'll definitely talk about local a bit later on. I think you said at the start of that um, you didn't envisage a career when you were younger in place and property marketing and everything else that you do. What did you think you were going to do? What when you were at school, what did you want to do?
I wanted to be an author.
Did you?
I always wanted to be um, a writer. I would say author at the time, but it was writing. I was really passionate
Yeah.
about writing. And when I went to university, I was going to do journalism, and I ended up doing media communication because I guess I was a bit scared that journalism was a bit niche. But I really wish I'd done it actually, because it really is the writing aspect that I'm passionate about, and I still am. I love writing. I'm not sure that everybody wants to hear what I've got to write, but I do still enjoy it. I'll get that book out there one day.
um, so talking of real, like for anyone that doesn't know what you do at real, tell them.
My favorite topic. Um, um, Full service agency is such a dirty phrase at the minute, I think, but essentially, we're a full service creative agency operating in the property and place industry. Do you want a bit of background to it?
Yeah, like it's. I want to know why full service agency is a dirty word. Not being a
I think,
marketeer, like
yeah, I mean, there's agencies that have existed in the last 5 years or so, and they've sort of come and said, we're not full service. We hone in on this particular area, and we're great at it. So we do the same for our industry, but we like to manage the whole process. So we kind of work as I would say, you think of an integrated marketing agency, or I think you think of, this massive organization, but really I do think of us as an integrated team because we essentially operate as our clients' marketing team. That's how it's worked so far. Not for everybody. We do come in and do just project work, or I just do consultancy. But ultimately, in the main part, what happens is we start to support a client with their marketing, and then we'll end up doing an audit, and they'll say, we want a new website, or we want to build an app, or it just kind of steamrollers from there. That's the wrong word. Snowballs. And I've built the team so that we can fulfill those needs in-house, for the reason that I'm probably a control freak and I like to have oversight of what's happening. I know that what the quality is going to be like. I know what the time frame is going to be if it's from my team. If I have to go out to somebody else, um, I can't control those things. So that's not my preference. I don't think we've had to do that in any of the cases. We have had some clients who've said, we've already got these CGIs done, and then we'll work with that. Not a problem at all. But I like to be able to go to them and say, we can fulfill your brief. We can do it all for you. This is how long it's going to take. This is what it's going to cost. And, we'll work with you. And we can be very communicative, because things change. And I can't guarantee that for an external. So full service is a good thing, in my opinion, for us anyway. It works for us and our clients. So yeah, but ultimately that's what we do. Have I answered the question?
Yeah, absolutely. and I mentioned it earlier that you've been going almost 8 years. Is it 8 years yet?
Yeah, 8 years in
Um,
May.
8 years in May.
I
And
know.
whenever I look at your socials, it always looks like you're having so much fun.
It's always a picture of me, isn't it? I know, it's
But,
terrible. We're always having a ball. Why wouldn't you? I don't want to sit in a stuffy office and do something I don't enjoy that's not going to, bring me joy and make me smile. It's just not for me. I read a book, thanks to Sally Day, who started her book club this year. I read a book called 4,000 Weeks, and it talks about how long you've got on this earth, basically. Think of it as positive, see it as depressing, however you want to see it. Ultimately, it is a fact. We've got a finite amount of time, and I personally choose to do something that I love and be happy during that time. So yeah, it's not made up. It's, we really do stick by what, by the name. We are very real and authentic. So but we're
um,
still professional. I'll just slide that in there.
well, it's interesting. Like I was, when I was thinking about content and content marketing's everywhere now, right? Everyone wants to be a content
Mhm,
creator. Well, maybe not
mhm,
everyone, but a lot of people want to be content creators. Um, so it's kind of like, dare I say, personal brand and all those sorts of things. Those terms have come out. It's like I was trying to work out if this is a good thing that
mhm.
there's so many people out there creating their own content. Um, what do you think?
Providing it's not a spin, I think it's great. If you're creating a personal brand that doesn't represent and reflect who you actually are, then no, I'm not for that. Um, but it's the intention is that it's a way of portraying you. If you are a brand, what do you stand for? What are your values? And putting them out there. And I'm all for, putting yourself on a pedestal and telling everybody what you're truly about. And you clearly are, because this podcast is an excellent example of allowing people to do that. So yeah, I'm all for personal brand. I think it's a good thing. Like I said, within the confines of its use, you know.
But that's kind of why I asked you the questions around, we're talking about real and being real and authenticity and
Mhm.
everything else. And um, do you look at certain, whether it's personals, brand socials or company socials, and just think that that's not true? Like you're
Yeah,
talking
what a load of
about,
old tosh
yeah,
every
that's what I was going
day.
to say. Like, but why do they do? Surely that's not ever. Surely that's going to get found out, right? When you do business with
Gareth, it's
someone.
all about the money.
Yeah, I get that, but it's kind of like you're going to get found out, right? If that's not you. It's something I was looking at the other day around, people are using Chat GPT to write loads of content, right? And it's all over
Mm.
everywhere, particularly on LinkedIn. Even people using AI to make comments, which I find absolutely bizarre. Uh, you know, that, um, and I tested it out sort of about 6 months ago, like getting Chat GPT to write blogs and stuffing it full of keywords and all sorts of stuff. There's me pretending I know anything about marketing, um, but it's like, where's that going? What's the point?
Mhm.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just talking into an echo chamber, just ranting
Mm.
about AI and lack of authenticity. But if that's where it's going, how is agency like yours going to cut through that? And by being real, like, is it getting harder and harder to find out what's authentic out there on people's socials and brands?
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there. I thought you were going to ask me, how are we going to survive? and we'll be fine. um, but because we're not, Hollywood may struggle, for example. There's new I can't think what it's called now, but there's a new tool with ChatGPT now that you can ask it to, go out and film something in the Sahara, 10 o'clock at night, and it'll go out and do it. And it's CGI, but it looks so real. So there's certainly certain companies that are going to struggle. Why we've done this to ourselves as a human race, by the way, I'll never know. Don't get me wrong, there's lots of benefits from it, but I don't know why we're doing ourselves out of our jobs, our careers, our businesses. But yeah, I haven't got a problem with it. I don't like, okay, so there's a few things. I don't like when people use it to the nth degree. You've just said people use it to write comments. I didn't know that. That's insane. Why not just use the thoughts in your head? Why people think that an AI can say something, say their thoughts better than they can, I'm not too sure. I use it, I'm not a hypocrite. And I say this for local. I don't do all my shopping locally. And I everything that I do includes everything that exists. So I use AI. I'm not using it to say my words though. I will use it for ideation, for example. If I've
Yeah.
got, let's say I was going to be you today, I might say, I've done all of this research on Laura Bosworth. This is what I think of it. Can you give me some questions?
Mm.
And I maybe would go with that. Some people may disagree with that. That's just my personal preference. That's how I would use it. I certainly wouldn't use
Yeah.
it to put my thoughts on a page though. But if you do use it or have used it, you can tell when other people are. There's real giveaways in the style of the content. And especially if it's written, how it's ended. There's always a really cheesy call to action at the end. And if they haven't changed it, it's really cringy and I feel for them. But I do worry, and I was talking to somebody about this recently. So we have a team. Started off with our first hire, which was Tracy, who's now our creative director. And before Tracy joined us, I would do bits and bobs on Adobe Suites, whether it's, Photoshop, Illustrator, whatever. I can barely open it now. I don't need to, thankfully, but I haven't used it in so long, I've forgotten how to do it. And that's my fear with AI. If people are using it to think for
Mm.
them, whoa, what does the future look like? I don't know.
Well, maybe that's it. Maybe you're talking about, love of writing and skill of writing. Like when
Mm.
I see that when somebody writes, you know, they write posts or a blog or an article or something, you know, I think maybe the positive that's actually starting to stand out more because there's so much
Mhm.
rubbish out there. When somebody
Mhm.
actually
Yeah.
writes something really good, the engagement and the impact of that is probably amplified. But maybe I'm just an optimist. Who knows?
People have always said write about what you know, and AIs don't know anything other than what we tell them. So
Yeah.
that speaks volumes for me. Um, yeah. You said at the beginning, and I realized I didn't answer the question about weeding out what is real and what is fake. And when when the metaverse was first introduced, I started to get a bit worried that, oh my goodness, how are we going to live in this metaverse world? And then somebody said, put it in context, you spend X amount of time on the internet, it's going to replace that time. And then AI came out and I thought, oh my goodness, how are we going to move forward without using our brains and whatnot? And then somebody said, graphic designers didn't always have Adobe. They used to actually draw things out physically, so they use it as a tool. And I thought, yeah, brilliant. That's in context now. But if people are actually using it and saying it's their real self, yeah, we need ways to authenticate. And hopefully somebody out there is working on that right now.
Um, and you said about well, I was talking to you about your socials, and you said that it's usually pictures of you. Um, not always, but I know what you mean.
Often.
Um, do you like being in front of the camera?
I don't mind it. I refer to myself as a reluctant extrovert. I'd say it comes naturally, but I cringe. afterwards. So yeah, I don't really know what to make of it, to be honest. But I think this year I'd said to myself, if this is what if you're gonna get on this real authentic soapbox, you're gonna actually have to live by it. So just flipping put yourself out there. So that's what I've started to do. And from a marketing standpoint, my reach has skyrocketed. And I think it's because people engage more with people, whether it's something that they've actually written, video, voice, image. And how are they going to get to know you if you don't actually put yourself out there? And even if that's images or, a thought that you've had that you think nobody gives a toss about that, oh, I'll share it anyway. So long as it's not, a picture of you having beans on toast, because the days of everybody being interested in what you're having for your dinner have gone. So long as there's something in it, then yeah, I'll put myself out there. I'm all right with that. I think you have to stand by what you live by.
So you talked about local, your other business. I refer to it as your other business.
I
Like,
know it's because it came second.
yeah,
My second child.
yeah. Whether that's true or not, maybe it's your business, should I say, local.
Yeah.
Now, uh, tell people about that and what it is, and I think you covered why you started it, but what is it designed to do?
Yeah. Local initially was designed to be a marketplace that highlighted what was local to you. And it's not intended to be something that tells you what events are happening, what your neighbours are doing. It was more, sorry, there's a plane overhead. Can you hear that?
No.
Oh no, and I've ruined it. Okay. Yeah, it was more to support local commerce and business. And the reason for that goes back to, and I won't harp on about it, but it goes back to having a town centre that's vibrant and got something about it. So that, for me moving into one of my, for example, when I first moved down to Congleton, it's the hub, isn't it? And if the hub doesn't exist, how do you ever start to build a life and meet people and whatnot? So I was very passionate about actually showcasing. So it's a set in a nutshell, it's a marketplace for promoting what's local. So some people may go onto Amazon and buy something. I want to get to the point where they'll go on to local and they'll search for something, or they'll search for a business and it will tell them what's there. So that's essentially what it's supposed to do. It's still in beta at the moment. And we have worked around a few setbacks by creating more content, because we did some research and we spoke to some business improvement district managers and business owners and consumers to say, why are you not using the high street? Why are you not in your town centre? What's going on? And the feedback generally was, we don't know what's there. We don't think if we go there, we're going to be able to get what we want. We're certainly not going to go just for one thing. So we started to showcase what is actually there. We started to go to these town centres, go into the businesses, meet the owners, the people that are working there, showcase the products. And now we're evolving that into virtual tours and drone work and whatnot to showcase what's there, because ultimately if we want to get people more in the real world, we have to reach them digitally. And this is what I was saying before about, I'm not a hypocrite. I'm not going to say everything I do, because I have local and I'm passionate about that. Everything I do isn't there. I still order things on Amazon. It's convenient. I'm a busy woman. But ultimately, I think there should be a good balance, and there isn't at the minute, because a lot of these businesses don't have the capacity or the capability or the knowledge to put themselves out there. So many of them don't even have social media. How can we expect them to thrive? And we can't even put it on consumers because they don't know they're there. So I just wanted to bridge that gap and connect the dots a little bit so that consumers know what's there, and then we can start to try and pull them in to use that space.
I think I was reading about it. I was trying to think about my own shopping habits, which are probably really boring. But I was thinking, because
Not to me.
I wrote down a question about, why don't, I saw you talking about Body Shop recently, about, the decline
Mm.
of Body Shop on the high street, and thinking, and the question I was going to ask is, why don't people, or why do less people go shopping on the high street anymore? And then I sort of reflected back to myself and thinking, well, look after the kids, or work, traveling, everything else. It is convenient for it to come to home, but what did I do before that? But
Mhm.
so so I didn't really have the answer. So I should probably just ask you the question, really, shouldn't I? Like, why is it that is that it? Why are less people going to shopping
Bec-
in high street?
because online exists.
Yeah,
They built it and we all went to it. Why
yeah,
would we not use it? E-commerce exists, and when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, it didn't, so my parents didn't have the option to order things and have them delivered to the house. I don't think people were, oh, this is going to sound awful, not that I don't think people were busier then, but I think the expectation on lifestyles is higher now, and I do think people have less time. I appreciate that I wasn't an adult in the 90s, so this is purely my sort of reflection on looking back at it, when I was a teen and now. But the really sorry, the doorbell's gone, so the dogs might go. um so I think my reflection on looking back at the 90s and using high streets and town centres when e-commerce wasn't in existence is also coupled with the fact that the expectation, because of the internet, is so high now that people need to be at their desk earlier, achieve more, travel more, especially after COVID. People were working earlier, finishing later, didn't have the commute. And then COVID and lockdown came to an end. People went back to the office, so had those commutes again, but the expectation didn't change. So people are just so busy. And also, the expectation on parents and what they should be doing and achieving for their children, I think, again, I don't have children, but I'm an aunt, and I can see from my friends raising their children as well. It's very different. And I used to play out in the street, that's not really a thing anymore. Parents have to entertain their kids, or have that situation ready, and that environment ready, and that takes time. So the convenience is necessary. So that's never going to go away. But I think that's why it happens. E-commerce was built, big retailers and brands got on board, and why wouldn't we use it if it's there?
I said I'm on a mission this year not to ask boring questions, and I'm not sure if this next question strays into boring, so apologies if it does. But obviously, you want to have a big impact with local, right? But
Mhm.
there's a lot of high streets out there. So how will you scale that business to make it have the most amount of impact? See, I tried to make it as least boring as I could, talking about scaling a business, but
It's not boring
that's
to me in this.
there's a huge amount of retail and real estate to talk to,
Yeah.
shop owners to go and speak to, or everything else. How do you plan to have the most amount of impact doing that?
Okay. So twofold. Um, we're not only talking about independent businesses here, we are talking about bricks and mortar, large scale retailers.
Mm.
I'm sure you and many listeners will have had and no longer have an M&S, a WH Smith, a Boots, those sort of retailers on their high street. So I'm talking about them as well. So I think just to put it into perspective, I'm not purely talking about all of those smaller ones. But the model for local is through business improvement districts. Do you know what
Mm.
they are?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
sorry
mean,
if that sounds really patronizing.
you should probably tell anyone that doesn't.
So BIDs, business improvement districts, are in their 20th year this year. They were created to essentially support a, a geographical region. Oh God, it's so hard to explain. Don't put this bit in. They were essentially bids were essentially created to support the commerce of a town or a particular area. The bids that we focus on are town centre, which are primarily retailer based, or businesses on the high street. There may be cafes or restaurants and that sort of thing. And so what happens is those businesses vote businesses within that region vote as to whether they want the bid. And if the vote weighs towards yes, the business improvement district is implemented, and all of the businesses pay a levy, which goes to the bid to manage their area. And that supports things like street cleaning, Christmas lights, and lots of things that I'm sure lots of people assume is the council, but is actually the business improvement district. So if you go onto a business improvement district website, you'll probably see a shopping section. And if you go down, they will have listed their businesses. So the problem with that is they're not actively promoting it digitally. Most of them have a street team. They'll go out and they'll have, all of their branded jackets on, and they'll get all of their content. They'll put it out online. Fabulous. But when people are actually looking to buy something, they're going to TikTok and they're going to Google, and those pages aren't being promoted or marketed on there. So we want to take it away from their site or plug in our site to theirs so that they get the benefit of having those listings, so people can see what's happening and what's there on the high street, but also that it's talking to people when they're looking on Google and saying, I want to buy a raincoat, and we can pop up and say, well, there's this one 2 miles away and it's this shop. We just want to bridge the gap a little bit there. But rather than going out to all of the individual businesses, we'll be going out to the bids, and they will then be distributing it. And I would say the average bid has between, say, 350 and 550 businesses within each one. So we'll target it by town, and that's how it will grow.
Is that, I mean, I'm sure there's many reasons why the high street and town centres have been struggling, but is it that lack of, and again, I know you're focusing on larger retailers as well, but taking an independent shop, or they might have a few independent, small shops or whatever, they might be passionate about what they create and sell and everything else, but is that where they've been left behind a little bit without that sort of marketing and digital expertise? Obviously, that's probably where you come in.
Yeah, well, yes and no. Some brands are absolutely fabulous when it comes to self-promotion, but others set up because they want to do what they love, which is, make and sell cards, be a sustainable clothing designer. They're not also marketeers. The problem with being a small business owner is you do have to wear all of those hats and basically do everything, or you have to bring in external support. And with the decline of their business, they have less revenue and less ability to afford those services. And that then becomes a chicken and egg scenario. And if we just let it be, they're going to end up in full decline. And then we lose out as citizens, because there then becomes this void space. So ultimately I think they do struggle with marketing themselves. Many of them, from what we've heard from them directly, feel that it's not their responsibility to do that. They feel that they're on the high street and it's the town's responsibility, either as a town manager, council, bid, or as a consumer, to come and buy from them. And again, the problem with that is people don't really care what you think, and they'll do what works for them and their lifestyle. And it's not really the responsibility of the council, it's your business. And ultimately, if it wins or fails, you're the one that gets the benefit or the loss of that. So they really need to start taking more guidance, the wrong word, just allowing more help, I think, to come in and support them, and seeing the bigger picture. So we've been talking to smaller businesses about collaborating with each other to create the destination of the high street. So for example, we keep using Bicester Village as an example. Consumers are flocking to Bicester Village. They have a great destination product. It's marketed well. I used the Christmas ad as an example, and I basically said, why are you not doing this? Why is your town not, what's different about your town and this shopping destination? So currently that's what we're working on with a couple of our clients, is to turn the high street into a destination, so people know what it is, know what's there, and we can market them as a destination rather than those individual businesses, which is obviously much more costly.
That makes sense. And I read something you said about starting a business, and it was you described the early days as the grow or go years,
Mm.
and I wondered what you meant by that, and what advice you would have for other company founders, maybe even myself, that are in their early, maybe in the grow or go years. What talk to me about how those first few years were, and why you described them like that.
I kind of describe them as grow or go in the sense that go is to be gone. As you know,
Yeah.
it's kind of that use it or lose it thing again. So you can obviously trundle along with just yourself working as a consultant, or you're one other maybe employee or freelance. Um, but me personally, I do want to do something. I want to leave a legacy. I want to do something impactful and make a difference. So we need to grow, because it's not quite as drastic as saying otherwise, what's the point? But for me, what I got into this to make an impact. So do it, grow and get there basically. Otherwise, kind of don't bother. I don't really want to say, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No,
um,
no, absolutely. Yeah.
in
Um,
the early days, um, do you know what? Starting up Real was a bit of a breeze, to be honest with you. Um, the way we set up was really interesting. Well, I think it was interesting. I'm sure other people don't. Um, so I actually was unhappy in my previous role. I felt um, hemmed in. Do you know what? Actually, one of our clients said, not my client at Real, my client at my old employer, said that they felt that I had had my wings clipped. And I thought, oh my goodness, they shouldn't be thinking that. But in hindsight, it was just that I wanted to do so much and I wasn't allowed to do it. I had to work in the confines of my job description. And that's ultimately why I left, because I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be able to spread my wings and achieve all of these great things. Um, and so I just think if you're going to set it up and that's what your intention is, you know, try flipping hard to actually get it done and just, yeah, grow.
yeah, and that kind of
Grow into
it
something
stuck.
amazing.
Yeah, it stuck with me in a couple of ways. I was talking to somebody the other week that's seen that, seen so many people that went into, say, consultancy on their own and have gone back into employment because either it wasn't for them or they couldn't make it work financially, or whatever else. And I think you know we feel similar sometimes, that you're limited by your own capacity and you can't grow. You'll end up in decline. Um but yeah, it's just interesting to hear that you describe it in that way, that it's almost like get on with it and don't be afraid to hire people and grow, because it is a risk taking people on, isn't it? That's
Mhm.
that's hard, but
Biggest
yeah.
risk we ever took.
Yeah. um
Yeah,
Another thing I want to ask you about, you're a trustee at Homestart. why
I
did you
am.
why did you choose to do that?
Honestly, I wanted to gain some experience so that I could add value to communities. I had never been a trustee before. I looked at potentially becoming a trustee of a student union because I've worked with student unions. I know the setup, but there wasn't anything in my regional area, and I didn't want something remote. I wanted it to be somewhere that I could see the impact. So I had a look on Reach, which is a website to look for non-exec roles or trustee positions. And Homestart came up, and there is a Homestart in a town not far from me. So I got in touch, and although it's around families and children, and I thought, are they going to get any value from me as someone who doesn't have children? And then I thought, well, hang on a minute, I've been one, and my own childhood really shaped who I am. I was raised by a single parent in a household that didn't have a lot of money. And I look back on it as the best time of my life. That whole thing about look at those people who think they're so rich, but all they have is money. I kind of grew up with that sort of mentality. And I spoke to my mum about it, and it turns out she also used to be on the board of Home Start. And I thought
Okay.
it's just a sign. So I got in touch, and they were actually looking for a treasurer, which, as I mentioned before, money is not my forte. So I talked them into taking me on to support them through marketing capacity. So we did that, and it's coming up to a year soon, actually. And
Wow.
I've seen so much that I think I've probably gotten more from them than they've gotten from me at this point.
I'm sure that's not the case, but and we work with a lot of non-profits and charities, and find that volunteers are increasingly hard to find since COVID. And I'm not quite sure why that is. I don't know if you find the same at Home Start, whether is it more difficult to get people out of their houses these days since everybody got more comfortable being at home?
I think the recruitment process has always been a challenge. However, we're fortunate with Home Start that it's cyclical in the sense that so many people are affected either as a parent of young children or the same as me, looking back on their childhood and want to give something back. When they get to a point, maybe as a grandparent who's just retired and they have a bit more time on their hands, we find that they're quite happy to join and become a volunteer. So I think we are quite fortunate in that sense. I wasn't with them before COVID, so I can't really comment on whether it's changed or not since then. But we always have a recruitment drive going. I think we could always do with more. So yeah, there's definitely more that could be done in terms of getting people out and helping. But I'd say it's probably the other way as well. The end users allowing people into their homes, because
Mm,
that's ultimately what happens. Our volunteers go into their homes to support them, and there's definitely a fear around letting somebody else in. But fortunately, the way that it's set up is that their volunteer almost become like a family member. So it's just those first couple of interactions, I think, that are a challenge. So I'm quite passionate about getting the message right for volunteers and for the end users, and also for dads and for men and well, not just dads and granddads, but just men in general getting involved, because it's very female sort of focused in terms of the volunteers and even the people that work there. The trustee board as well, actually, I think is probably leaning more towards women. So I'd like to get something out there that talks more to men and them getting on board, because sharing that, we know that men could probably do with talking more about what's affecting them in their lives. I've heard you talk about the early days of having children and sleep deprivation and all of that. And I think if we can add elements of support to dads, from other dads or other men, then that would be impactful.
yeah, I think that's hugely important. When I looked at everything you're doing between real and local and everything else, Homestart, everything else, do you ever get bored?
Is that the end of the question?
Yeah.
Bored of what do you mean? Do I ever get bored of work or just life in general?
Well, it's like, do you have the time to get bored?
Oh, plenty. Yeah, loads of time. Remember, we don't have children. I must say, my brain doesn't switch off
Yeah.
from the businesses, but not in a bad way. I absolutely love it. I really do. So no, probably not.
It's just like, I see people running their own businesses and talk to lots of people like that. And I get the feeling they get stuck in a bit of a rut sometimes doing the same thing, obviously, and stuck in a rut's probably the wrong term, but obviously you've been in business for a long time, um, working with particular businesses, and whether that's, how do you keep that sort of fresh approach is probably it's probably a better question than do you ever get bored, isn't it?
See, this is the great thing about doing what I do, though, because although I love having retained clients, they are absolutely our bread and butter, and I wouldn't want to run a business without them. We have plenty of project work coming in, so there's always something new coming in that needs a different perspective or a different audience. And where we started out focusing on student accommodation, because that's my history and heritage, that's evolved vastly over the last 8 years. So now we're dealing with luxury and more entry level new home developers. The audience, even for them, is so different, let alone, the audience for build to rent and PBSA and, even university accommodation, if you take into account, parents and international students and all of that. So when you look at how different the end user and the audience is, it really changes the project that you're doing. And we have lots of different projects coming in. So no, I think we're really fortunate in that sense. And plus, let's not forget, I'm that really annoying business owner who always has some wild, wacky idea that the team are like, oh my goodness, not again. And instead of telling them face to face during our team meetings, I put a task in Monday, which is where we manage all of our projects, and assign it to somebody quietly so that they can't roll their eyes. Not that any of them roll their eyes. I mean, they never do. Everybody on the team is so great with all of them. But yeah, there's always something happening. And especially with local as well. We're launching, we've launched a survey at the minute, which is out with university accommodation teams and PBSA operators to understand student local lifestyle. How do they interact locally, kind of bridging the gap between those two elements of our business. So the report for that will be out in late spring, and then we've got another product that's a part of local that will come out in September to support students to get more on board locally and understand what's happening. So there's always plenty happening.
I don't know how you find the time, but I find it hard enough to run one business, let alone two. Uh,
See, this is the good thing about loving it, though, isn't it?
yeah, well, that's very true. Okay, so we come on to the quick fire round questions now. So, if you could change one thing about the world, what would it be?
So this is where I'm going to bore everybody to death, because it's this whole living in real life, living in the real world. I would, if I'm being totally honest, I'd take us back to the 90s. But since that's not going to happen, I would try and focus people onto living IRL,
Okay,
as the kids say.
and what advice would you give to someone who wants to change direction but doesn't know where to start?
Yeah, so again, I did think hard about this in terms of my struggles, and a huge one for me is looking at what other people are doing, because I tend to be more of a big picture thinker. And when I've got things to do, I've really got to say, right, today, this is what I'm working on, or for the next 2 hours, this is what I'm working on. And if I don't, and I pop onto LinkedIn or something and I see something that someone else is doing, I go, oh my gosh, that's such a good idea. And then all of a sudden my brain starts working and all of these ideas start coming out. And then I think, oh, I'll do that then, and then I'll do this. And all I really needed to do to take that one step further was do the thing in front of me. So stop comparing yourself to other people. Don't look around. Focus on what's in your brain, what you want to do, and move forward with that. Don't worry about the rest.
I think I should write that down. I definitely
I
could do
think
with
I
some of
should as
that advice.
well.
And what's going to be your next big change?
Oh gosh. I mean, every day's a ball, Gareth. So I'm pretty happy with how it is, to be honest. I think for me, I really want to just keep making moves in the direction of achieving that change that I want to see in the world. I want to see people having a better balance of online and offline living. So I'm going to keep moving towards that through, each of the projects that we're working on, and sharing pictures of myself all over our socials. Probably in the green dress. I really need some new pictures.
Um, and final question, if you were to recommend a guest or more than one guest for me to speak to on No Shift, who would it be?
Oh, you've already got the list. Let's refer back to our LinkedIn comments, shall we? No, in all seriousness, I did have a think about this, because there are some fabulous people out there in our industry, most of whom I think you've already had on here. I'm not sure that you've had Kellyanne Watson
No,
from the
not yet.
class.
No.
So from my knowledge, her experience goes into student unions and that side of things. And I think that's where we get a bit more reality of student life and community on campus. So I think she would be a great guest. And if I can add something else, if that's okay,
Of course.
I warned you I was a talker. Um, I haven't got a name for this, but I was talking to somebody recently about the massive impact of when the first Gen Zers came into university. And all of a sudden, people are talking about this hideous term, Gen Zalfers. I can't even bring myself to say it. It's awful. However, if we can just stick to the proper names that have been given to the generations, Gen Alpha's, it's not far away. I would love for you to find a guest that does something in the realm with Gen Alphas in this industry, and we can start looking at what's coming down the pike for our industry and how we need to start to pivot to address the needs of them.
Well, that's the first. Maybe we'll ask the listeners based on that criteria to recommend a guest and see who they
Yeah,
come up with. Because I'm not
that'd be
creative enough to
interesting.
come up with
Just
come
ask
up with anyone myself.
ChatGPT.
um, Laura, thanks so much for conversation today. There's so much good advice in there, and again, maybe I'll bore people by saying about being real. I think it's so important and something, you know, again, I harp on about my own journey, sort of starting a business and how you end up copying people because you think that's what you should do, and actually being yourself just makes the biggest difference, and that's what people want to see. And I think more power to you for having that message, and also, around local as well. I'm excited to see that grow because I don't think anyone's blending the online and offline life particularly well. So yeah, thanks very much.
You are welcome. Thanks for having me.